Welcome, my name is UrsoDoSono and this is my beginner guide on identifying vehicles in school. Whether you're peering through your scope or listening for the rumble of engines, knowing what's coming can make or break your mission. Let's dive into how to tell the difference between a threat or a minor distraction. Note that this guide is mainly for field descriptions and general use for vehicles, so that you can help your team know what they're up against. I understand that some VICs are considered APCs, but in squad that is often only a secondary feature to their main purpose of engaging enemy infantry or vehicles. I will be utilizing the in-game descriptions. I will not be breaking down the intricacies of calling a love W a love W. Instead, we will refer to general terms used commonly by the squad community. Along with this, familiarize yourself with this area in the command map. It will tell you the list of VICs your team has and the vehicles the opposing team has. This will provide you with critical information to aid your callouts. We're going to be discussing logistics and transport vehicles, armored personnel carriers, infantry fighting vehicles, reconnaissance, mobile gun systems, main battle tanks, and any specialized vehicles. This section addresses all vehicles used for logistics and transport. This includes helicopters, jeeps, trucks, and boats. A few examples of these include the KAMAZ 530-50, the M939, and the Love W. How do these names translate into game? They translate into Logi for a vehicle that carries supplies, or a troop transport which carries troops, but no supplies. We can differentiate the logistical vehicle from a transport by the signature supplies in the back of the transport shown here. Helicopters, which translate into heli, and boats, which, well, they don't really go by any other name. Although some logistics vehicles can be armored, like the AAVC, or even armed, like this one here, but in any case, their main function is to carry troops and logistics around the battlefield. Let's move into light armored VICs. This section I split before the APC as there is this gray area for light armored trucks. This will include all variations of the MAT-V, the M1151M2, the Samir, and others. This classification is described in-game as MRAPs, tow wraps, and crow wraps. MRAPs being vehicles such as the Humvee, the MATV, and the Tiger. Tow wraps are a rare variant of these same vehicles but have a tow or some other sort of ATGM mounted on top instead of a machine gun. Then there are crow wraps, which are these same vehicles, but they have a remote weapon system, meaning the gunner is not exposed. Now, let's move into armored personnel carriers. This section addresses the APCs of the game. Examples of these are the AAVP, the BTR-80, the Bulldog, the LAV-3, and so on. These vehicles have light armament, rarely better than a 50 cal HMG, and plenty of seats to move personnel. Hence the name, Armored Personnel Carrier. These vehicles range from barely to very effective at engaging infantry, but are generally bad at engaging other armor. How do these names translate into game? They translate into APC, or the general name associated with the faction-specific APC. These can include the Bulldog, the Striker, the T-Lav, the BTR-80, or the Shipbox. The Shipbox has a long history in the game. People use this to describe any tracked, slow-moving vehicle they'd rather not be in. Let's move into IFVs, or Infantry Fighting Vehicles. This section addresses the IFVs in the game. This will be your BMD-4s, BMP-1s, BTR-82s, LAV-6, and others. This classification dictates that these vehicles are generally more equipped to engage infantry, but also light to medium armor, and in some cases, even tanks. These vehicles can be used to transport infantry, but this isn't their main purpose in-game. So how do we call out these vehicles in the battlefield? We generally call out these vehicles by their names, like the BTR-82, LAV, BMD-4. This might sound tricky, but usually there are 1 to 2 IFVs per game, per team. So by looking at the vehicle list, you can generally get it right as long as you can identify whether the vehicle is tracked or wheeled. The downside to this is that sometimes there will be two quite similar looking but very differently capable vehicles on the enemy team. For example, a BMP-1 and a BMP-2 on the same team, with the BMP-1 being a very strong anti-armor ambush vehicle, and the BMP-2 being more general purpose IFV. This difference can be very important to your team though, so ask your squad and teammates around you to help you identify these vehicles. Let's move into the Reconnaissance section. This section really only has 2 vehicles in it. Along with this, they are rarely referred to as recon vehicles. Instead, they are identified with their names, the Coyote and the Scimitar. These two are basically the same as an IFV or infantry fighting vehicle, except for the fact that they come with less ammunition and less seats. The Coyote can carry a crew of 2, a driver and a gunner, and 2 additional infantry. These vehicles are not meant to transport infantry, and they are utilized as hit-and-run vehicles, best used for their speed and ambush potential. Let's move into the mobile gun systems. There are only 3 vehicles in this section, and this section is fairly new to the game and ever so expanding. Currently, there are the Sprut SDM1, the M11-28, and the ZTD-05. They are considered a hybrid of an IFV and tank hunters. They lack any ability to transport infantry, but can make up for that downside in firepower and vehicle killing power. Since they are pretty much a tank cannon mounted on top of a light armor IFV hull, it is easy to mistake these for a main battle tank. But the difference is significant. IFVs generally struggle to deal any significant damage to a tank, but on the contrary, MGSs are very vulnerable to ambushes by your generic IFVs. These 3 vehicles are described in-game as the Sprut, the ZTD, and the M11. This section is about the big dogs on the battlefield. They excel at anti-armor engagements, but are certainly capable of killing infantry as well. Examples of this include the Leopard 2A6M, the M1A1, the T72, and others. In-game, they are described either by their specific faction name, the Leopard and Challenger for example, or they are simply referred to as the MBT, or main battle tank. Let's move into the specialized vehicle category. The game of Squad loves to throw in some weird vehicles from different factions. These are specialized vehicles, such as the BM-21 Grad, or technical UB-32. These Vics are described in-game as the Grad or rocket truck. So what do we do with all of this information? Well, we can begin to take the step in the right direction with vehicle callouts. The best way to call out a vehicle is to learn their distinctions. Logis and MRAPs are generally quite easy to identify without any extra steps. For IFVs and tanks, any easy place to start is by asking, is it tracked? And then make sure to look at the vehicle list to see what your opponent has. If the enemy only has a BTR-82 and a BMP-1 in the vehicle list, and you hear tracks, you can safely assume it is a BMP-1. As you get more familiar with vehicles, you'll get used to their more intricate differences. The BMP-2's distinct fire rate, the rattling engine of a T-62, or the unique sounds of the PLA autocannons. Let's talk about some things to avoid when calling out vehicles. Do not assume just because the vehicle has tracks and you hear them that it is a tank. There are many tracked vehicles in game that could sound similar to a tank but aren't anywhere near it. Along with this, not every large vehicle is a serious threat. Remember, there are tracked logistic vehicles or tracked vehicles limited to an open top exposed gunner. Remember to always check the vehicle list at the start of the game to know what the enemy has. This allows you to assess whether you can push or to take cover from an enemy vehicle. Last but not least, one of the most important aspects of giving armor callouts is giving your team up-to-date, accurate information. If the enemy vehicle is on the move, remove old markers and replace them with newer, more accurate ones. If you don't know exactly where it's going, tell your team the general location or general direction you think or know the vehicle is moving in. If you don't know exactly where a vehicle is, make sure you tell your team its approximate marker. Information is the most important aspect of your friendly vehicle's success, and by keeping information updated and accurate, you enable your armor to make the right decisions and succeed. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more squad content. I wanted to extend a great thank you to Show of Force for allowing me to stream and record on their server. If you haven't found a home server, I highly recommend looking into Show of Force.